It was a banner year for San Antonio. The World Heritage designation, the courthouse, $135 million, and of course, you know, the transportation dollars that will be coming in into the San Antonio area. So it was a very good year, but we still got to build on some of the things that we've been working on. One, certainly we got to make sure that the courthouse, it's not over. There's still certain steps that have to be followed. It's not just an automatic, here's the money. Because keep in mind, San Antonio was number 8. And I still say that usually we fund number 1, which is Nashville. And then you got to wait for number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So whoever was number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7, right before number 8, San Antonio, ought to be thanking San Antonio because of the great work that you all did to get everybody funded. But there has to be a spend plan that GSA, we met with GSA last week, I think it was last week, in Richard, and there's still a plan, and we still have to get an authorization from the T&I, which I think will be okay. But there still has to be a spend plan, and the good thing about San Antonio, we're halfway there. In the sense that we got half of the design, you got the land that's ready to go. So we got a lot of steps there before a lot of folks, and I'm in particular, nothing against number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 7. We're ahead in many ways. So we still have certain things that we have to do to make sure that the courthouse is done. The other thing is, moving on, there's still work to be done. I know the direct access from San Antonio to Reagan will be nice. I can certainly vouch for that. There's been a lot of times where I've been trying to get to San Antonio. It's very, very difficult in a direct flight. So one of the things that I think both of us, I think we all understand this, is that we got to get an airline on board. It just can't be the San Antonio. We got to find a partner. And hopefully when we talk on questions and answers, y'all can tell me where we are on that partner, because you got to have an airline that'll be with us and not fighting us behind the scenes, if you know what I mean. So we got to make sure that we get a partner on that aspect itself on that. Now, let me talk about some of the things that we still have to do. The reauthorization of the FAA is one that's going to be moving pretty quickly. The ones that were there with Schuster last week or so told us it's going to be moving pretty quickly. And that's why the work that y'all doing here is at a very appropriate time. We got to move on the FAA. We still, the appropriation process is going to move very quickly. We were just told that instead of doing submissions in the middle of March or toward the end of March, they're going to be due at the end of this month. Because as you know, Congress, because it's a presidential year, there is a Republican convention, there's a Democrat convention, and this summer, that means that probably, I think, Congress will be in less days than the state legislature is when they're in session. So, Dan, you're very familiar with that. So it's going to be a very abbreviated year, so that means everything is going to be on the fast cable. It's going to move very fast. Now, of course, we always move in appropriations. We always move, and at the end, there's always an issue that comes up that will stop the process in the middle of the process, and we might end up at the end of the year trying to do the omnibus appropriation like happened this last year, and has happened other years and so. So I say this because I know that if there's any submissions that we have to look at, and again, I'm sorry we can't do earmarks. You know, the majority came in. They disliked President Obama so much that they took earmarks away. And guess what? Who's the only one that can do earmarks right now? The president. If you look at OMB, when we were trying to get the OMB to put the courthouse here, they could have put an earmark there and put the San Antonio courthouse here. So, you know, we can do general things for the appropriations. We don't have the earmarks like we used to. So it's a little bit more difficult, but there's still ways of doing certain things. But again, on the submissions for appropriations, should be at the end. I'll get y'all the exact time later on, date, but it should be at the end of this month. It's going to be moving on a very fast pace itself. A couple other things. Speaker Ryan wanted to see tax reform. My old friend from school, or should I say from the state legislature. Kevin Brady is the new one who's taken over Ways and Means. He does want to do something this year, not the big reform, but he wants to look at something this year. It'll be limited in many ways. The question is, if we do some tax reform, what do we do with the extra money? Do we pay down the debt? Do we use it for certain things? What do we do? And that's something that has to be worked out. If anything, I wish part of that would be put in highways, and that would be something that would be extremely important to the state of Texas. But again, it's something that we have to look at as we go on. But we're hoping that we can at least have some sort of limited tax reform on that. At least that is what the plan is. But as you know, presidential elections are always have a way of kind of stopping or delaying things. Big issues like immigration reform. Speaker Ryan said that as long as President Obama's there, we're not going to have any immigration reform. And again, with all due respect to, without getting to political parties, there's always a reason why not to do immigration reform. But I'm hoping that the window of at the beginning of 2017 will allow people to come to the table and hopefully have some sort of immigration reform, because it's one of those issues that's not going to go away. It's just delayed, and secure the border, do this, do that, and there's always a reason why not doing immigration reform, and it's not going to go away. We have to do sensible immigration reform that has reasonable border security, not have a wall that the other side is going to pay for it. It's not going to happen. But has sensible immigration reform, border security, has some sort of guest worker plan that works well, efficient. And of course, what do we do about the 11 to 12 million undocumented persons that we have here? So there are still, if you look at the border, there's still a lot of things that we need to do at the border. But again, y'all are 150 miles away from the border, and I have to be quite honest, sometimes even 150 miles from the border, people still have a misconception of the border. I'll say this, Eddie, you're familiar with Laredo. We had some military folks that were supposed to be staying in La Posada. They had some sort of contract they were going to do. They were going to cancel it because they were worried about the security. This was a couple years ago. And so I had to call the guy in charge and said two things. One, without due respect, the border is actually exactly with San Antonio. You look at FBI stats on murder rates and per 100,000 and assaults, etc. Number one. But number two, aren't you guys military? What are you worried about going down to the border itself? And I mean, this is only 150 miles away from the border. The border, as you know, has been good to San Antonio. The border has been good for the rest of the country. Every day there's about 1.3, I think it's now $1.4 billion of trade between the U.S. and Mexico. Our port in Laredo, that goes up 35, handles about 40% of all the trade. If you take all the 18-wheelers that cross from El Paso, go down to Brazos, every port in Texas, every port, and compare them to what Laredo does, they don't even match what Laredo does. You put everybody together, they don't even match, and they go up 35, and the traffic that we see in that particular area. So Schuster was very good to us, Chairman Schuster. We got freight corridors established to make sure, as you know, they started off 120 miles away from the border. It doesn't make sense when you handle 14,000 trailers in Laredo, and the freight corridor doesn't start at a place like Laredo. They start at 120 miles. I've never seen an 18-wheeler jump 120 miles before. Actually, that was a question I asked the secretary. I said, why are y'all doing that? And then the other thing is, for the folks who are familiar with the border, we added language, what we call the coordinated border infrastructure, to make sure that we have money for the infrastructure. Unfortunately, and I'll say this without due respect, I know I talked to Bruce Cox about this, the preliminary numbers that came in were just amazing. They missed the highlights of what ports of entry are all about. So we got to talk to the Department of Transportation about that issue, because I think they missed the point on that, to be quite honest. So we do the work in Washington, and somehow it's lost in translation when it gets into the state itself. So those are some of the issues that we have to look at, trade, immigration that we need to look at. And I say trade because the TPP is something that we need to look at. Question is, I know we'll have Speaker Ryan later on addressing us. And he was for it. He was very strong for it. Now I think he still supports it. The question is timing, because now he's got to deal with the Republican caucus. And it's a little different when you're wasting each chair and now you're speaker. In my opinion, he supports it, but the question is, when is he going to do it? And the faster we do this, once we get the economic analysis that we're waiting from the ITC and waiting for a couple of days, we need to do it and not do this in a lengthy session, because when you look at the United States and Texas being part, about 40% of the world economy, that puts the state that exports, like we do in Texas, in a prime spot. And more importantly for us, I'm waiting for the analysis from the U.S. Trade Representative and the CRS. What does this mean for the U.S. and Mexico in particular? How does that impact Texas? Because the TPP will be a NAFTA 2.0, and that will have an impact for Texas, or he have to share that analysis once I get that from the U.S. Trade Representative. So we got to pass the TPP. Schuster also helped us pass the Import-Export Bank. As you know, he got added there. It was a very interesting process. Some of the Tea Party folks put some of the ugliest amendments there to try to kill it, because all they had to do is add one amendment and the whole thing would have been killed. So there were some tough votes that some of us had to take, ugly votes, but they were trying to kill it because they just didn't believe in the Import-Export Bank. As you know, that is something that's good for business itself. Finally, let me just conclude with this. I'm so happy that y'all are here, because you know, when San Antonio comes to our area, you know, to Washington D.C., we do see direct impact back in the district, that is in San Antonio, in the sense that you come in, knocking doors, not only legislative folks, but also with the agencies to make sure they understand that San Antonio is one of the largest cities in the country, and certainly it's a very important economic impact itself, and we got to keep working. You know, some of y'all work with us, as you know, Joe Barton, Republican, myself as a Democrat, we push the lifting the ban on the oil exports. And as you can see, the first one that went out was from the Eagle Ford, went to Corpus Christi, and took off December 31st of last year. And of course, we're hoping that in the long run this will be good for the state of Texas, for the Eagle Ford, and you certainly have a knowledge of why that is important when we talk about that. So there's a lot of good things, but you coming in, knocking on doors makes a big difference, and I certainly appreciate all of y'all for being here. So at this time, I want to make sure it's 9:16, maybe 5 minutes of questions, and that way we can all take a coffee break. But I'll go as long as you want me to go. JD Salinas, where are you? Been texting me while I'm up here. So I'm going to pick on you. Where are you, JD? All right, you give me the first question. How's AT&T doing? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. JD, oh yes, JD is doing a fantastic job now with AT&T, and we appreciate it. Hey, by the way, let me tell you something. No, let me say this. If I can. The first, what was it, $8+ million? We sat down with J.D. Salinas for the courthouse, for the half of the design. He and I were able to put this together, but it wouldn't happen if he would have not done it. So, J.D., for the first half of the million, this puts us, because with that design money, that put us ahead of number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and 7 on that. So thank you so much, J.D.
Just a quick comment. There's been concern about the TSA maybe using that money, and I want to make sure that, first of all, thank you for what you've done. As April comes and the deadline comes, the spending plan needs to be submitted. So, can you just give us a quick timeline of what else is coming? And again, thank you for your leadership on the federal court.
Yes, sir. The money's there. But the issue has been, and I know somebody had called Judge Rodriguez called me back, and I thought we had Sylvia and I just took your place there at the GSA. I asked her to come down because what happens if number 1 goes over, number 2 goes over in spending, and then this total amount of money, there means there might not be enough money there. First of all, just the fact that we're ahead of half of the design, just the fact that we got the land available, we're ahead of a lot of folks. You know, again, without due respect, we were number 4, and we got knocked down to number 8. Basically, what happened is you can set the criteria any way you want to. When they take away security and emphasis on security, then we're knocked down. But nevertheless, it was done. Now we got to work on making sure that San Antonio is recognized and part of the plan, that they understand exactly where we are with our project. So we've been talking to Ms. Hernandez. We had a meeting with her. I've been talking to her, making sure that if this happens, I can, no guarantees, but I feel extremely confident that San Antonio will be one of the first ports that will be moving on the construction. Maybe after number 1, which is pretty good. But I think we're in the top, I'll venture that it's probably the top 3, top 4 of the courthouses since they're number 8. So we're ranked number 8, but I think we're going to be in number 3, number 4, around that area. So I feel very confident. And again, it's not only having the money in the appropriations. And let me just say this. Walter, Judge Wolf, or Councilman Wolf, and who was a Chico came in to talk to me back, I think it was the week before something. I have to apologize, and I'll say this publicly. I knew the money was there, but Chairman Ender, who's the chairman of the finance services that puts the money, had told me that the money was there. If you notice, I had a big smile, but I said we're going to keep working on it. The money was there already. That Ender and the appropriation leaders that had there. So the money was there. Now that we've done so much working with Chairman Ender, the subcommittee chairman, we got to just make sure that we follow through. And this is what you're saying. It's mid-April, they have to turn it, so we're working on that, making sure that everything's fine and sent. We also have to send a letter, and I think we're working with the city, a letter to ask the T&I Schuster for authorization, because you put the money, but you still have to authorize it, but it's a process that we have to work at. Chairman Crenshaw, I just talked to him, and he was kidding around with me. He says, "Okay, Henry, so we got your courthouse. You want a bridge? We'll get your bridge next year. And if you don't have a river, we'll get you the river the next year also." So it's a process, but you're right. It's not over, guys. It's not over. Don't just say, "Oh, let's move on from the courthouse." It's a process, because again, this is still Washington, D.C. Thank you. And again, thank you. You really were the one. We were at a restaurant, and I won't get into too much detail. We were at a restaurant, and he said, "I'm gonna get it done," and he did. He got the half the money that put us a leg above. So thank you, Judge. All right. We got one last question. All right, coffee's on me. Let's go. Thank you so much. Thank you.